Is that so? Can you draw us a line paralleling that to parenting and where we fall into that? Do we fall into that? Have you? Because what you're saying is, I mean, you're reading my mail because I think I've done that.
Well, first of all, we all do it, but this comes from fear and doubt, and so as parents, the default mode for parents is that whatever my kid does in the now, and what my kid does in the next, the future, is a direct reflection of my personal brand. Now, no parent says it that way, but that's what it is. But these kids have never been told that they can do hard things, and they've never been put in a position to do hard things because they've been getting a participation trophy for showing up. We can't keep score anymore, right? In the leagues, and so you lose all 10 games, but we're gonna have a pizza party and give everybody a Capri Sun and a trophy. And the kids are sitting there going, well, this is interesting. We didn't win any games, but we're still getting celebrated. And so over time, it becomes an insidious message that says,
welcome to Last in Line podcast, where we are highlighting, showcasing, and spotlighting great leaders of faith who have overcome adversity, cultivated resilience, and served others in a significant capacity. So settle in and be encouraged by this episode of Last in Line podcast. I'd like to welcome Ken Coleman to Last in Line podcast. Ken is a host of one of the radio shows on the family of shows on the Ramsey Network, Dave Ramsey. They have one of the top 3 syndicated radio shows in the country. And Ken is an amazing leader. He's an amazing speaker. He's a best-selling author. Ken has served at the Ramsey Solutions team since 2014 and has appeared on Fox News, Fox Business Network, The Rachel Ray Show. He's been featured in Forbes magazine. And he is in the process of doing some tours this year, some events, some speaking engagements. And Ken's got a great podcast, a great radio show. He is all about helping people. He's all about servant leadership. And that's right up our alley. We're going to talk today a lot about fatherhood as well, surprisingly. And we are going to discuss faith, as we always do. And Ken's going to talk about confidence. He's going to talk about purpose, some of the things that are necessary ingredients to success. Not only that, but significance and influencing people in a good way, in a big way. We're going to talk about Ken and what he thinks his legacy might be. And I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to this and ready to bring him to you right now. So welcome to Last in Line podcast, Ken Coleman. Ken Coleman, welcome to the Last in Line podcast. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I love the backdrop. I'm already a little bit more fired up than I was before I saw that. I mean, well, hey, I don't know if I want to hit somebody or fight somebody. It may be both.
I got to say, we'll let you try the helmet on someday, hopefully. No, I appreciate you coming on, man. I love your work. You've got your own show in the Ramsey Solutions Network and doing some amazing stuff, man. You released a book, late 21, I guess, the most recent book, Paycheck to Purpose, and we're going to dive into some of that. I feel like what I like about your stuff, too, is that some of it overlaps a little and connects and intertwines and weaves together. And I love it because it's all grounded and rooted in sort of the same concept of passion, purpose, influence, confidence, courage, those kinds of things. And man, that's right in our swim lane here. So I'm glad you came on. It's interesting. You've got I love your show. I've listened to a lot of the episodes I just kind of stumbled on it late last year, but that's on me. That's my bad. But thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man.
Man, we're going to talk a lot about leadership. We're going to talk about servant leadership specifically. This is a faith-based podcast, and a little bit of research on you. I get a feeling that that's not a foreign concept to you, and so I appreciate that for sure. but first, I kind of want to go a weird, kind of unique route on you,
Okay.
and you know, you don't have to buckle yourself in or anything, but um, I want to know from you. I've asked a lot of people this recently, and it seems to be catching on. So, if there was a time capsule 100 years from now, and we're digging it up, and it's your time capsule, what are you putting in there that's going to be evidence of some of the most significant work and contributions that you made to the world? Would you say?
Um, I would say it is hopefully the stories of my wife and kids. Um, because I mean that's a fantastical question, obviously, and um, that may not be the only thing in it, but it's the most important thing in it, and I really mean that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever God takes me home, um, I hope it's a big party. I hope my funeral's a real big party, and there's lots of speakers up there telling jokes at my expense and some of the things that I did, and maybe some friends and people that I added value to. Um, but the legacy that will matter most is what my wife and kids say about me, what they think about me, what they remember. And
Yeah.
so, I think that's where significance starts.
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about that we have relational and occupational purpose. Every human being has purpose in both of those lanes. Relational, obviously, that's our family and friends, and then occupational is us creating something positive in the world,
Yeah.
and then get paid for it. And so there's purpose in both. So I think that if it's about significance, it's that. It was like, okay, the dude the dude loved his family, was faithful to his wife, got better at it, uh, sometimes a lot slower than others, and loved his family, loved his kids, set his kids up to win. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's probably the first and foremost, and I think
That's good.
maybe some testimonies of people
Mm-hmm.
who listened to me on the show or listened to a talk, or I had the privilege of doing a one-on-one Q&A with them, maybe at an event or maybe in a photo line,
Yeah.
who said the testimonies would be he believed in me, he challenged me.
Mm.
That would be pretty cool, I think.
That's a great answer, and I may have to steal that and rephrase the question next time, because I think what would the testimonies be? I think is a great, powerful way to really describe the impact that is. And you mentioned, I also would probably throw in a couple your books in there, because I mean, you're reading my mail when you're talking about going from paycheck to purpose. And I know that there's plenty of people who can resonate with that, but I mean, there'd obviously in that time capsule, I think, be a thumb drive of all the people that have called into your show that you've impacted and you've had influence with, and you've
Mhm.
blessed with your advice, your expertise, your insight. I mean, I think, like you said, that list is long. So, I think that's as heavy as we'll get in this conversation, but
Oh, I
no.
love it, man. Keep bringing it. Keep bringing
All
it. I'm
right. Well, I
good. I'm
figured,
good.
yeah, you've been in broadcasting. You know what it's like to get next to the fire and to
Yeah.
feel a little heat and to thrive in that environment. So, man, I love that we're going to do this. So, I guess tell me, as we sort of alluded to and segued into one of the books, we're going to dive deeper later. But why paycheck to purpose? Why write that?
Yeah, in any area of life, when you want to go from where you are to a desired future, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
here, but I want to go there, there's a gap, right? And, crossing that gap, that divide, is the key to that destination, and so many people in life, whether it be relationally, financially, professionally, spiritually, they they can identify where they would like to be, where they want to be, and they're able to go, okay, there's a sizable gap, all right, between where I am and where I want to be. But where most people in life, and I'm afraid it's the majority of people in life. They stay stuck here, and it's because they're not quite sure how to bridge that gap, right? I know that I want to get over the gap. I know that I need to, want to, all the things, but I don't know how to. And instead of figuring it out, they just kind of stay put. And so that's where complacency sets in.
Mhm.
So that being the case, in the space that I'm in, where I want to help as many people as possible, just become the best version of themselves. Do something purposeful for the world, and then the reward for you is some significant meaning in your life to go, hey, I made a difference. Everybody wants to make a mark. And
Mhm.
so as I looked at that gap in the professional space, occupational and purpose space, I realized that there needed to be a clear path for people. Like, how do I get from the question that everybody asks, what should I do with my life? How do I get from there to that ultimate destination where I am fulfilled, I am successful? And so that's where I came up with the idea, from paycheck to purpose. So how do I go from a life where where I'm working for a paycheck, to a life where I am working for a purpose, and the paycheck takes care of itself? And so that's the idea there. I wanted to create that mental transformation from here to there, from paycheck to purpose. And so, as you know, we created 7 stages, kind of using the metaphorical climb. So I'm at the base of the mountain when I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. And then when I get to the top, I've actually reached a whole nother level that most people never think about. And so the 7 stages are: get clear. So that's how to identify the mountaintop.
Mhm.
Get qualified. That's me getting ready and getting the ability to get on the mountain and keep going. Getting connected, is how do I find the right people, right, that help me keep moving. Getting started, that's the moment where we go, okay, now it's time. And then getting promoted is moving up, and then getting the dream job, getting to that top of the mountain. And then the 7th stage is giving yourself away. And the idea there is when I get to the dream job, and that's just defined, by the way, is using what I do best to do what I love to produce results that matter to me. I mean, spending the
Mhm.
majority of my day using what I do best to do what I love to produce results that matter to me. That's the dream job. It's not this fantastical unicorn. But when I get to the very top there, at the top of that mountain, life's not over, but now my view changes. And so I've achieved a lot, and the money's there, the success, all the things there. But now, when I'm on top of the mountain, remember, this whole climb, I've been looking up, John.
Mhm.
Then when I get to the top, you know what changes? I'm looking out. So my entire view changes. And so that's when we can go, okay, now I'm working to give myself away. The money's there, the acclaim, the things I've accomplished, whatever. None of that crap matters, by the way.
Mhm.
But when I can now say, okay, I am truly able to be free to do the work that I feel like I was put on this planet to do, it's a game changer. And that's the 7th stage: give yourself away. So you're working for impact, for legacy.
So good. I mean, it's speaking our language here for sure. And I mean, the world needs that part. I think, and to your point, I think people see where they want to be. They may not know how to get there, but even if they do, sometimes they lack the fortitude and the courage to maybe take that step of faith, and the fear just
Yes.
paralyzes them. But once they get to that, maybe we have everybody that figures that climb out, but then when they get to the top, it's kind of look at me, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of wave the trophy and pump the fist. But I love you're talking about looking out, maybe even looking down to pull that next person up with you. I did talk about maybe some key mentors, without maybe names or specifics, be as comfortable as you want to be there. People that have kind of exemplified that the best in your life, where they were all about dragging people up that mountain, or boosting somebody up that mountain, or like just leadership in general, solid influence, servant leadership, mentorship. Talk about that in your life.
Yeah, I've been blessed to be around some people that have had tremendous impact on me. I worked for years for John Maxwell, who's a well-known leadership author and speaker, and John was a guy that always had a big vision, always looking forward. He had a great pace about his growth and connecting with people. So John's had a tremendous impact on me just watching him and how he does things. I've worked for Dave Ramsey for years. I've worked for Dave longer than I did John. And, Dave's got a tremendous motor and a heart to help people and very, very driven. And so you get around guys like John Maxwell and Dave Ramsey, what you'll find out pretty quickly is their pace of purpose pulls you in because they're setting a really good pace. So if you want to hang out with people like that, you got to have a good pace. And that's why I wrote my second book, actually, The Proximity Principle, is this idea of being around people who naturally pull you by their pace. If you've ever trained for a half marathon, I did, and I would run with guys that were better runners than me because I knew that in those training sessions they were going to naturally be faster than me, and it would force me to set a quicker pace than if I were out there by myself. That's the idea. I've been privileged to meet and get to become friends with guys like John Gordon, who's again, multi best-selling author, one of the most positive dudes I've ever met. Pat Lencioni, well-known leadership author, and Pat's become a friend. Brian Buffini, the Irishman, who's kind of the man in all of real estate training, an immigrant and a story, comes over with nothing, become friends with him. So these are guys that are older than me, not by a huge amount. Well, certainly John is, and Dave are a little bit older than me, but these other guys are they're ahead of me on the path. But and I could go on and on and on and on and on. I don't want this to turn into a name dropping thing. It's just, those guys. I specifically mentioned those guys because they are all friends or mentors, and they've all had a very direct impact on my pace. And,
wow.
And that's huge. Pace. I'm a big sports guy, and I'll just drop this one other thought. It's well known in the running world, when you have a longer race or whatever in the Olympics or a road race, that there are pace setters. They kind of get out and they kind of set the pace. And I think that's huge, is that you need to be around people that are setting a much faster pace than you would ever set for yourself.
Yeah. And I would obviously, they push you beyond kind of your own expectations and limitations that we put on ourselves. They force us to tap into that extra gear that we didn't know we had. And if we want to keep up with those guys, which who doesn't, then we're going to have to tap into that or tap out. Right. I mean, we're going to have to get in sync. And so I've always defined, and I didn't create this, but I've always bought into this definition of leadership. It's as simple as everybody's a leader, and because everybody has influence, in my opinion. So everybody could be, if you're in leadership and you deny that you are, then you're just probably going to not be a great leader. But I think leadership is influence. And then you talked this week, in fact, I believe, about boosting influence, and some of the three that's points that you made really kind of tapped into what I've heard from the pulpit in a spiritual sense: time, talent, and treasure. You maybe worded them a little different, maybe use some different terminology, but that leads to connection, which leads to trust. I would love it if you could, and we're going to have maybe the link to that episode in the show notes, because I think people need to hear it from you in that way. But can you give us a thumbnail sketch of kind of your thoughts on that concept?
On how to
boosting influence and using that giving and serving and the time, talent, treasure, those kind of things.
Yeah. The way you boost your influence is ultimately by boosting your value. Okay. And now some people are going to hear that, and you got to stay with me on that. Okay. Because everyone is valuable in the eyes of God. Okay. So what I'm talking about is an exchange. So if I want to influence people, I cannot demand influence. I can't demand it.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. So I have to exchange value. Okay. And when I exchange value, so when I add value to people, then that increases my value in their eyes as it relates to, I'm going to listen to what they say. I'm going to follow their example. I'm going to follow them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the idea. So we'll go back to it. So, and I've slept since I did that show, so I'm not going to say it exactly how I did on this show. But what we started with is I've got to give in order to get. Now, some of you are going to hear that and go, oh, that sounds real. No. It's that I don't give to get, but when I give, I will get. That's the difference. Okay. So, for instance, if I want to increase my influence, okay, and let's put this in a professional context. Let's say I'm a 23-year-old dude and I'm in the workforce, my first job, and I want to grow in my role. Okay. Well, I do that by finding ways to increase my influence, even though I'm not a leader in a positional seat. I am just a person who, to your point, can influence people. So how do I build my influence? Well, I'm looking for opportunities to give of myself. Okay. So I'm coming in early. I may stay late. This is not quiet quitting. Okay. This is just good old fashioned hustle, right? And I'm going to look for opportunities to serve my leader above and beyond my key responsibilities. I'm going to look for ways to step in and maybe pull the rope a little bit for my coworkers when they need it. Okay. I'm going to give of myself. So I'm giving extra effort. All right. That's one example. Another thing is that, hey, I'm going to look for opportunities to just give of my time where I'm volunteering. I'm going to look for opportunities to give of my money. Hey, I can help a person out here. I'm going to step in and I'm going to give. I'm going to make a difference in their life or in the life of an organization that needs my help. I'm going to give of my talent. Okay. If I can't give time or a bunch of time, but I can give a little bit of my talent, jump in, and somebody just needs me to collaborate, I'm going to do it. So for instance, if you call me after this episode and go, hey, if you won't mind, I'd love to get your take on something in my business or whatever. I thought you might have something to add. I need to say yes to that. And the reason I need to say yes to that is because by helping you in private, nobody hears our conversation. You're not publicizing it. You don't need to publicize it. I don't want you to publicize it. I want to add value to you. If I give you good advice and it resonates with you, we get off a phone call and my influence has grown because I gave of myself. So it is this law of reciprocity, right? Zig Ziglar was famous for talking about this, and I'll paraphrase his most famous quote ever. But if you help other people get what they want in life, you'll get what you want. And what he was saying was, he wasn't saying I go out and give in a manipulative way in order to receive, but it is because I have the spirit and the habits of giving of myself. I don't have to worry about the getting. I'll get whatever I need. And because influence must be given to you. You cannot take influence. You cannot demand it. The other person gets to decide whether or not you're influential or not.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard that concept somewhere, that principle, sowing and reaping maybe. But yeah. You know what I mean? But I think some people do, like you said, get confused that it's a slot machine of sorts. And if you're dumping enough in, you're going to get twice as much out. Well, that's really not the motive, because like you said, it will wash itself out. And God knows your heart. I think people know your heart too. They can see right through somebody with different motives. So I love that. And I like that you mentioned, you kind of weave in connection and then trust, because if we're wanting influence, then we've got to build that connection. They talk about, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you hear, that kind of thing. And that in and of itself is connection. But then they've got to know that you're legit. They've got to know there wasn't that motive that was just self-serving. They got to know that you're authentic. And that's where the trust comes. Because once you get to that trust, if we're looking at this in three levels of, the give and the connect and the trusting, if we're looking at that trust part, if you've got that, I think it's locked in, unless you betray that down the road. But of course, but I think you're locked in on influence.
That's right.
I wonder, how much of your work, because I'm shifting gears here, and I'm doing a terrible job at segueing, but this hit me just now, that how much of the concepts that you talk about and teach and coach and speak about and write about, how much of those get woven into the fabric of your parenting style and your kids? And does one impact the other, or are they mutually inclusive? Like, talk about parenting a little bit. I don't know. I just get passionate about that topic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I certainly believe that the work I do every day of developing content to help people uh, be their best certainly plays in to my parenting, and sometimes good and sometimes bad. Um, as a guy who gets the extreme privilege of coaching adults who willingly call me or stand up at a live event where I'm speaking and ask me a question, every time I do a keynote, I always do Q&A. So
Mm-hmm.
if a company gives me 60 minutes, John, I'm like, I'm not speaking for 60. I'll give you 30, but I want people to be able to stand up and ask questions based on what I just said. And I love that interacting and the coaching in that live setting, which is just real time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of something that I A, enjoy, B, have gotten proficient in. And it was not good parenting, but I would take my style of coaching adults throughout the day, and I would go home and I would coach my kids. And I learned that my kids don't need me to coach them. Now, they need other adults to coach them.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that I was being a coach and not a dad, and there is a very different role in my mind there. Now, certainly, they need boundaries and guidance, and but I hadn't done this before, and I'm still figuring it out. I mean, I'm smack in the middle of parenting 3 teenagers, and there are some days where I literally, and I'll be very vulnerable here because I don't know how else to do it. There are some days where I just go, I literally don't even know what to do. And
Join
what
the
I've
club.
well, yeah, what parenting has taught me, and if I could encourage dads right now, what parenting has taught me is when you parent from the illusion of control, you are setting yourself up for tremendous frustration and setting your kids up for disorientation. And there's very little that we as
Wow.
parents can control. And I did not realize that I was a control freak. Um, I did not, because I don't present that way as far as details and organization. I probably present that way to my team sometimes because I'm very clear on what I want, how I want it, and why I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very collaborative as well. But I learned with parenting that I got some really deep seated fears that was making me very controlling, and I was coaching that way, coaching my kid. And my kid doesn't need me to coach him. My kid needs me to just be a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am trying to dig apart all the questions and everything and kind of come at it because I'm pretty good at that with adults. And my kid doesn't want to tell me that. My kid just wants to hurt. And my kid wants me to just be there. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some negatives to that too, is my point. And so I'm starting with some negatives that I've learned that, well, I didn't plan to say this, but I just feel oppressed to say this because I think there's a lot of dudes right now that need to hear what I'm about to say.
Yeah. Bring it.
There are days where I have won all day long at work. I mean, like victory after victory after victory, in my sweet spot, feeling the juice, up high, adrenaline, endorphins, some great things happening, some really encouraging things that have encouraged my heart, so
Mm-hmm.
purposeful. And I will go home and have a night that you would think was the complete other end of the spectrum, where I felt like an utter failure.
Hmm.
Okay. And I've got a unique situation. I've got a unique family situation. And we don't talk about it too much because of the privacy of our kids. But, whether you got a unique situation or not, we've adopted two. And then, we got all similar age. So you got hormones and all kinds of things going on. My point is that there are many days where I am so confused because I'm winning over here and I'm praised over here, and I feel like I'm losing over here and I'm criticized over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With just teenagers. And it's just real stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all that to say,
That's good,
um,
man.
it is less about transferring um, styles and strategies that I win at in work to home, and it is more about um, allowing the two to ground each other. So what I mean.
Hey, before we get back to the conversation here with our guest, I want to thank one of our sponsors, a new partner, Uncommon, which is a ministry that is equipping and empowering great men to become the husbands, the fathers, and leaders they were called to be. Go to uncommon.org. That's UNCOMMEN.org. Check out their content. Go to YouVersion, download their devotionals. Great team, great people, great men, and they're out there for you. They're out there with great content, and they're out there to encourage us to be the men we were called to be. So I want to thank TJ and his team at Uncommon. So now let's get back to the conversation with our great guest here at Last in Line Podcast.
What I mean is that there are some days where I don't have a good work day and I'm frustrated about something, or something failed, or there's something uncertain, and I've got a lot of junk going on with that. To be able to go home to a wife who's incredible and supportive and affirming, and get lost with my little girl. My boys, they're teenagers, so they don't want to be around me anymore. That's normal. But my daughter's still young enough to where, like, she'll do something amazing and mother me, and she knows I'm down, and that lifts me, right? And I realize that what really matters is not work. What matters is this legacy here. Then there are days where my home life feels like it's a dumpster fire, and I don't sleep the night before, and I'm dealing with so much junk coming from that, right? And then I get into the office in a place of purpose. This is why I teach this. And I get into my sweet spot at work, and it's a salve for my soul, because I realize that, okay, there's a fire over here, but there's also work God has for me over here. And I'm going to be placed in front of some people today that God has placed me in front of. And no matter what's happening over here, and where the enemy is attacking me here, and where I'm hurt here, or where I screwed up here with my kid, and I hurt my wife this way, that I still have an opportunity to, as a broken vessel, still pour something out. Okay. And so what I have found is that purpose, in seeing great purpose in my personal life, and seeing and fulfilling great purpose in my professional life, they ground each other. When one's not working, they tend to, and it's a very interesting rhythm. And so and I have found that they help me in both ways. So it's kind of a sloppy way of saying that, but I think we need to understand that, men, that's a normal feeling. I cannot be the only one that feels that way at times. That's those two roles feed each other, and I think that they keep you grounded.
It's good. No, I agree. And, guys have gotten a bad rap in the past, I guess, for compartmentalizing too much. But to that point, I think it's to our best interest if we compartmentalize, when we leave the workplace and we go home, we got a totally different role, because you may or may not have heard leadership explained in this way. But a guy told me this, a youth pastor explained this, relational and positional leadership. So you might have both at work. You might be in a position of leadership based on your title, or you might just be really good at relating and connecting, and people want to follow you because of that. Well, when you get home, I don't know that it's by default that just because we've got the title on our business card at home, that everybody's just in line like they should be, in step, in cadence. So we got to maybe draw a line in the sand more toward the relational leadership aspect at home, to your point, because kids don't need the coaching always. Sometimes they do. I coached my kids baseball for a long time, and I started realizing that my voice was just kind of bouncing off the ceiling, and
Yes,
someone different could tell them the exact same thing, and it resonates and it clicks, and there we go. And so
that's right.
that was a hard lesson to learn. But you mentioned a term called nannyship versus leadership.
Yeah.
I wonder if that applies here. I'm quite certain it might. But talk about where you came up with that, and what, I don't know, somebody listening out there that might be falling into the trap of being the nanny
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah, so nannyship, I coined that term because I, on my show, I was reporting coming, out of the pandemic, in kind of fourth quarter 2021 into 2022, a lot of the big corporations were starting to make people come back to work, or they were wrestling with this: do we keep them remote, hybrid? And so you kind of had some old school leaders who were like, I don't trust that people are working when they're out of the office. And again, both models work,
Right.
but that's where this came from. And so I was talking about Jamie Dimon, who's the Morgan Stanley CEO, I believe is the company. He's the CEO of a very well-known guy. And so they were monitoring people's key fobs and their computers. So they were like, okay, I'm going to monitor and see, are you actually coming in when you say you're coming in? And they were monitoring keystrokes on their computers, stuff like that. And the word got out. And I basically held this up as one of the worst forms of leadership there is. And I called it, it's nannyship. So the nanny is hired to keep their eye on the kids at all time, right? They got monitors in the crib to make sure the kids going to sleep. They never let the kids out of their eye, right? They're just totally watching, hovering over the child. And that is that kind of leadership. And if you can't inspire people to be responsible, autonomous within the responsibilities that are laid out in their job description, and you have to monitor people's keystrokes on their keyboard, you are not a leader, you're a nanny. And you are out of control. You are fear-based. Your own fear is creating the fear-based leadership. You are all about control, and there's very little personal responsibility there. And so it's not leadership. It is nannyship. In other words, a leader is out front, eyes up, moving forward, because we've told everybody, this is where we're going. This is why we're going. This is how we're going to get there. That's a leader. A nanny is, what are you doing? What are you doing? Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Hey, I told you not to do that. Come on, it's time to eat. That's not leadership. And so that's what's wrong with our culture.
So where is that? So can you draw us a line paralleling that to parenting, and where we fall into that? Do we fall into that? Have you? Because what you're saying is, I mean, you're reading my mail, because I think I've done that.
Well, first of all, we all do it, but this comes from fear and doubt, and so as parents, the default mode for parents is that whatever my kid does in the now and what my kid does in the next, the future, is a direct reflection of my personal brand. Now, no parent says it that way, but that's what it is. And so that's why the marketing messages work so well, that you got to send your kid to college or they're a loser. So you got parents who don't want their kids to go in a trade, so they force them to go to college they can't afford, get a degree that they can't and won't use. It's all about status. And so the other problem in our education system right now is the helicopter parents. Teachers aren't able to teach. They aren't able to grade properly, because if the kid brings home a D+ or an F, then the parents get angry at the teacher, and they're in the schoolroom. I was talking, this is absolutely fresh. This is like the hot now at sign at Krispy Kreme. I'm blessed to know a lot of coaches in football and basketball, pro, NBA, and then the college level. And I was talking to a college basketball coach yesterday. And this is a guy that I stay in touch with, and their season is over. And so every year around this time, he and I get caught up. And I said, all right, coach, talk to me. And he said, Ken, I got to tell you something. He said, we just finished our season-ending meetings with each of the 13 players on the squad. This is Division I basketball, okay? Division I. He said, not one of the 13 players asked any questions or made any statements about how they could be better in the team, on the team. Not one. He said every one of them asked questions or made comments about playing time, getting a chance to shoot the ball more. Can I get the green light? Not one of them asked a question or said, how can I be a better team player, find my role? Not one. Now, let me tell you something. He then went on to say that that's because of the parents. And he said, this year and last year, the first time in my 25-year coaching career where we've had multiple parents call us as college coaches and complain about their kids' playing time.
I didn't know that was even allowed at that level.
Well, it's not, but the point is parents are still reaching out. So here's to your question. We have got helicopter parents because parents are too concerned about how our kids feel and not concerned enough about how our kids act. In other words, we care more about how our kids are feeling. We want them to we want them to feel better instead of do better. And it's like, wait a second. And so we're raising kids that have no grit. We have kids that are presenting as anxious all the time. And we had a lady stand up at an event I spoke at recently and said, we're having a real hard time with our med students and these nursing students. They're just so overwhelmed by anxiety. They're just scared to death. And I don't know what to do. And I said to the lady, I said, you need to put your hands on their shoulder and say, you can do hard things. And these patients need you to do hard things. These kids have never been told that they can do hard things, and they've never been put in a position to do hard things because they've been getting a participation trophy for showing up. We can't keep score anymore, right? In the leagues, and so you lose all 10 games, but we're going to have a pizza party and give everybody a Capri Sun and a trophy. And the kids are sitting there going, well, this is interesting. We didn't win any games, but we're still getting celebrated. And so over time, it becomes an insidious message that says, I deserve to be rewarded because I simply participated. And you're going to see, it's just a lack of grit, and you're going to see more anxiety because nobody knows what it's like to fail and then get on the other side of it. They're scared to death to fail.
Yeah. And I wonder if that entitlement element, which is what you're describing, as this next generation of entitled, let's just call it flabby folks, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, they're going to become leaders that almost by default become what you described as almost maybe a forceful, almost like title dominant, like I'm entitled because I'm a manager, because I'm a leader. Here's what entitlements worked for me for 20 years. And this is how we're going to do this. And I don't know why it just kind of came to me that we're raising leaders that are going to become that. And an entitled leader is almost the worst kind of leader. Because it's all about them. And I think servant leadership is absolutely the antithesis of that.
That's right.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you talk about college sports, I mean, I almost want to know how many of those guys are going to be in the transfer portal at some point too. You know, I mean, because we've taught that beast has taught our next generation of athletes, hey, if you're not happy here, just go to the next place. I mean,
let's be honest, transfer portals in sports is downstream of culture.
Of course.
The Great Resignation is an example, and younger generations coming in out of college, they want to make six figures. They don't even know what it takes to make six figures, but they want to make six figures. And they'll change jobs. They will ghost you. The whole term ghosting started in a relational context, but is taken on a professional context, because kids will literally not show up. Young people literally won't show up. No resignation letter, no character, just I'm out. And because everything has become transactional.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. And I'm going to tell you, you bring up a very good point. I've never even said anything on this. But what's going to happen in the leadership realm is that you're going to have people that get thrust into management positions that have zero desire to lead because they don't want to deal with the same kind of crap they've been doing. Meaning, they want. Nobody wants to give, you know? And so then they're like, well, I don't want to deal with that. They would rather just be promoted on up and whatever else. They don't want to get into the trenches with people and serve them. And so what happens is you create this entitled leader as well. So now the entitled leader is leading. There's no leading going on.
Sure.
And what happens is, is you get this us versus them mentality. And that's what's happening right now when you look at things like Starbucks in trying to unionize. Because the manager is just as outraged as the worker. Well, the manager's 26 and has grown up like this and has never had to fight for anything, has never had to dig deep. And so it's just gimme, 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 gimme. And they're like, well, I'm on your side. And so we're taking on corporate. That's how that stuff happens, by the way.
Yeah. And we're not off, because you talk about participation trophies and then you fast forward to that age group now coming out of college in the workforce. Maybe they've been in for 5 or so years, but you mentioned a stat a while back that says 1 in 9 men have opted out of the workforce. And I don't know the ages there. I think you might have even said 25 to 50.
25 to 55. And these dudes have taken their ball and gone home.
That's it.
Because here's the data on this. The men that have chosen to go home and not work right now, it's because they are dissatisfied with their income and their status. Okay. So what's happened is, let me read between the lines there. Okay. What's happened is that they just think they deserve success. And so if they're not making the money they think they deserve, and it doesn't have the title, or it's not a sexy company or whatever sizzle factor that they want, so then they don't feel good about themselves. And so they would rather retreat from society and literally go back to the cave, because they're so ashamed of themselves. They'd rather become the victim, though, and blame it on everybody else, and then just disappear. And they're being supported by friends and family members. And it's the equivalent of when we were little kids. I'll never forget, my mom and dad would invite our friends over, and we'd play cops and robbers. All right. And boy, that's probably controversial now, but you had your good guys and your bad guys, right? And we all figured out which team we were on, and we'd start playing. And it never failed that one of us would get their feelings hurt over something, and they would go, I'm going home, I'm quitting, and it ruined the whole game.
Right.
That's the equivalent of what's going on here. It's like, I got my feelings hurt because I failed, or I got overlooked, or I got fired, or whatever. I got my feelings hurt, and I'm now going to quit the game, and I'm going home. And it's a massive, massive cultural problem right now.
Yeah, and the proverbial transfer portal of grown. I hesitate to use the word grown up, but of the males. I won't even say men. The males that are doing that are missing out on the message that they're sending to, if they've got children, chances are a lot of them do. And then guess what? We're on this perpetual dumpster fire of leadership at the most, but at the very least of just our society and the workforce in general. I mean, I don't know what we do. It would be hard to own a business where I need good people that are reliable and competent. It would be hard to have that. I guess, sorry, I'm not sorry that we just kind of have gone all over the place today, but I love the material that you put out on your show. And I think it's timely because, man, I'm looking at society right now and I'm thinking, what are we doing? Like, as men, what are we doing? Because like you said, we're okay with being at home and letting mama go make the money, let her do. And I'll just hang out and go pick up the kids. I'll get in car line and then I'll watch Young and the Restless. But where did that chasm, how did the chasm get so wide there? Like, how did we, and I know you kind of answered that a little bit, but how did we get so soft, Ken?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I think there's 2 major societal factors that have created this, because, I don't actually think a lot of these men are lazy. I think they're lost. And I think that the symptom of being lost, one of the symptoms of being lost, is laziness, a lack of engagement. But I don't think the primary problem is laziness. I think we have men that are lost. And let me explain further what I mean. If you've ever been lost in a car driving or lost, walking in the woods or whatever, you're very disoriented. And you being lost is marked by confusion at first. I'm confused. I'm not quite sure where I am. And it doesn't take long before fear starts to come in. Uh-oh. right? And then doubt jumps in. Like, I'm afraid if I'm lost, I'm going to be late. I'm afraid that my parents aren't going to find me if I'm a kid. I remember being lost in a department store. Man, it didn't take long for the confusion to go into fear and then doubt at the same time. I'm afraid of this happening, a stranger coming and kidnapping me. I doubt that I'm ever going to see my parents again. And it is a cocktail of confusion, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So when that happens, you are paralyzed. When those three things happen, I'm confused, then I become fearful and doubtful, and it just locks me up. Okay. And I think that that's why these guys are staying in the cave. I think that's what's really going on. So they've never had to develop grit. And so this gets back to generations of people getting trophies for participation.
Sure.
Okay. And just not seeing grit modeled.
But that was self-inflicted. But to your point of how they got in the cave in the first place, and when they took their ball and went home, they were just not getting the ego pat that they needed where they were. Right.
Well, these
guys just were born unemployed. Like they had a job, they had a role, they had a purpose. Right. But yet somebody told them, hey, you deserve more. That's one of my, I think probably my least favorite word in the English language is deserve.
Oh, I know.
And so that caused that, right? So it was self-inflicted confusion. So how did we get, you know what I mean?
Well, so that's part of it right there is that, so I wanted to make sure we understand that these guys are lost and they're presenting as lazy, but we need to have a little bit of grace to go, okay, they're lost, because that's how we solve the problem. So they're lost. The reason they're lost is because of that cocktail. But what happened is they screwed up, self-inflicted, or they didn't screw up. Maybe they just got overlooked for a promotion. Mm-hmm. The issue is they were not equipped with the tools to overcome the failure or the loss. Or
resilience.
They can't be resilient. Now, they can eventually, but in that moment, they cannot summon something they do not have. So if someone says to me, Ken, can you nail this nail into the side of the door? If I don't have a hammer, I can't nail it. Okay. Yeah. So we've got to understand that their parents, the environment, the experience, that they don't have the tools, or they never developed the tools, right? They just don't have it in the moment. They can get it, but not in the moment. So what happens is they're just unequipped. They're just ill-equipped to do anything with it. So what do? They retreat. That's the amygdala in the back of our head, fight or flight.
Sure.
They're not equipped to fight it. And so they fight. Now, there's one other factor. Okay. So just, they have no grit. They've never been taught to fail. So they don't know how to respond. But the other thing that's happening in society too, is that there has been what was intended to be positive. I believe this. Yeah. Now, I'm going to warn you right now. Of course, your audience is probably not woke, but some people are going to be a little bit maybe offended by what I'm about to say, but I'm just going to challenge you to listen to the truth. In the desire to promote women and give women opportunities. So in the movement to be pro-women, we became anti-men.
That's right.
Let me just say it that way, right? So certainly, women deserve the right to vote, and there was some good things happening. But the pro-woman movement, again, for all of its goodness, it spun off this anti-men thing in culture, and the media picked up on it.
Right.
So I think that's also an underlying thing where a lot of men feel like they're the problem in society, that they've done something wrong. And so then when something wrong goes for them, they've also got this other message here that by you getting out of the cave and going and getting a job, that's toxic masculinity.
Sure.
You fighting, you leading your family.
Yep.
You going out and providing for your wife and kids, that's toxic. So I am going to tell you that I think there's those two factors going on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like that you said that, I think we tried to overcompensate, like you were saying, and do something right by
Yeah.
the female population, but we muddied the waters between equality and equity. And now everybody is up in arms about what those words even mean. And
Right.
I mean, obviously we all have different roles as genders, but yeah, to your point, I think we overcompensated. Then we got over
think
our
about
skis.
it. There's been a message to a lot of men that it's okay for you to go sit home and play video games and be on Netflix all day long. And you and I don't believe that.
No. Yeah. And I'd be interested, I mean, not to beat people over the head with the Bible, but I'm not sorry that I bring up spiritual and biblical principles. I mean, I'd be interested to know how much of that population, where they stand, I guess is a fair way to generalize that statement. Because a lot, not saying all Christians are perfect. Obviously they're not. A lot of them are toxic, but I will say that I would bet a lot of those guys that are okay being in the cave eating Twinkies in mom's basement, I would think they maybe are lacking in the faith department.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
I digress. So respectful of your time. I mean, you made a comment, I think, don't you love being quoted back to yourself? No,
yeah, sure. If it's good, if it's bad, I'd like to deny it.
Well, you mentioned about how we obsess about the next thing, and we fail to win in the now, but one has to happen before the other one does. So can you elaborate for our audience? Maybe we do go into some of that, and man, we may have to bring you back again, because I there's a lot of things that I would love to talk. You just kind of opened up a can of worms, but talk to me about winning the now so we can win the next.
Yeah. So this is the temptation of every human being, because we're wired for progress. Yeah. And we adapt so quickly. So we can long for something for months or years, get it, and within weeks, we're already wanting the next. So that's just how we're wired. So we've got to be able to fight that. And this is something I discovered in myself many, many years ago. And so the statement is, if we obsess about the next and miss what we need in the now, we ultimately sacrifice the next. So what it simply means is this. It's okay to have a glancing eye on the next, keeping our eyes on the prize and the finish line. That's good. But only a glance, because we got to win the now. And so what do I need to do in the now? Who do I need to become in the now? Who do I need to serve in the now? You know, it's all that. Like, I've got to win the now. The opportunity I've been given now, there's stuff for me to do. And so I need to focus on crushing that, and the next will take care of itself.
Yeah. I mean, present in the moment. I mean, we all hear a lot about that. I mean, keep drawing a parallel to parenting and relationships with our spouse. And I mean, it doesn't really do any good for me to see my life 20 years from now. Not that that's terrible, but if my wife's trying to get my attention now and I'm daydreaming about the sports car I want when I'm retired, I think we got a problem. And so I don't know what advice maybe you have for us. We talked some about parenting, but let's talk to husbands right now. I would say 90% of my audience are married. Talk to husbands right now about, I guess, your self-assessment. You do. I mean, I know you do some tools where people can go on and fill out and get some information back about their strengths, their talents, those things, passions. Talk about your, maybe self-assess your role as a husband, how you've evolved, how you've grown, and maybe a couple of nuggets for guys that have worked for you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that you, as a husband, be very aware of how you and your wife are similar and how you're different, right? So there's all manner of things that you can do to do that. But I think it's really important as early on in your marriage as possible. If you haven't done it at this point, it's not too late. In fact, I'd start tonight and begin to make sure that you both are aware of where you're similar, where you're different, why you're different, what that means, and find that beautiful, mix of where I'm weak, you're strong, where I'm strong, you're weak, and figure that dance out. That's really, really important, because it makes the relationship so much stronger. But here's what I've learned. I'm approaching 25 years of marriage, and I've learned that the things that we get upset about most of the time are things that, if I were to look back on 5 years later, were so ridiculously insignificant. And so what I've learned is that on the big things, Stacy and I are really in alignment most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. Certainly our values and what we desire for our relationship and all that. But it's the small emotional stuff that can be blown way out of proportion. And so I think to the extent, guys, that you can figure out your triggers that turn those seemingly insignificant things in the big picture into really massive relationship things in the moment. I think that's really huge to figure that out and to get healthy enough to where you don't allow those triggers to turn into that anymore. That'd be my advice, because I think that's where a lot of relationship stuff gets into a really nasty rut that threatens a marriage. It's little things that left unchecked and no healthiness around turn into much bigger things.
Yeah. And if you can let go of some of the competitiveness that maybe has made us successful as men coming up through our careers, through sports, whatever,
right.
I think sometimes it transfers into relationships and then we're keeping score. And I think even with those small things, she won last time, so I'm winning this time type of deal. I think if we can let go and just understand that we're on the same team, of course, and that's fairly intuitive, but in the moment we sometimes gravitate back toward our I don't know, I guess our reflex of competitiveness, and that I'll speak for me on that. But thank you for that. I appreciate you coming on today.
Man.
Tell us about your two books and just kind of what the names. Of course, we'll have all the notes on where to find them. I don't like when people say where we can find your book. Well, you can go where everybody buys books, Amazon.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah,
but
I would just send people. I just tell you the two books are The Proximity Principle, which is a deep dive in how to connect the 5 people in the 5 places that you need to be in and around. And it's a wonderful book that kind of walks you through the beautiful art of connecting with people, because that's where opportunities come from. The other book we talked about, From Paycheck to Purpose, you can get both of those books, of course, wherever books are sold. The website to connect with my show and all of its different platforms is kencoleman.com. The Get Clear Assessment's a 20-minute online assessment that is going to spit back to you more awareness and confidence than you've ever had in your life. I promise you that, because it's going to measure what you do well. That's talent. It's going to measure the work that you love to do. That's passion. And then it's going to show you what motivates you, what results really get your juices going. That's mission. And you get a purpose statement that takes all of your results and puts it together. And it's a professional purpose statement that'll keep you focused on the North Star. So all of that's at kencoleman.com.
Wow. And I know you're doing some events this year. So
you can go. We got 4 events coming up. I don't know when this is going to air, but we've got one event in April the 20th in Kansas City. And then we are in Chicago, May 16th, Atlanta, May 18th, Dallas, May 23rd, kencoleman.com/events. These are super cool venues. About 200 seats. I'm going to speak, but more importantly, I'm going to be right there in the middle of the crowd, just meeting people where they are for Breakthrough. That's the name of the event. Answering their questions live in color, in stereo.
Sounds good, man. And maybe at one point we can get Houston on the map. This little town of Houston, Texas. Might be able
Houston, Texas.
Make the cut. But no, I appreciate it. It's been an honor to get to know you.
John.
It's been a humble experience that you would, come on and talk to the audience, because it's been a wealth of knowledge. And guys, you got to go listen to his show. The podcast is amazing. Get his books. But I appreciate you being here. He's been Ken Coleman. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.